go.
Domestic violence is any violence or abuse by one person against another in a domestic setting, such as marriage or cohabitation. Domestic violence is not just physical violence. Domestic violence is any behavior with the purpose to gain power and control over a spouse, a partner, girlfriend or boyfriend, or an intimate family member. Abuse is a learned behavior. It's not caused by anger, mental problems, drug or alcohol, or any other common excuse. Every 9 seconds in the United States, a woman is assaulted or beaten. Around the world, at least 1 in every 3 women has been beaten or coerced into sex or otherwise abused in her lifetime. More often, the abuser is a family member. 1 out of 3 women and 1 out of 4 men have been victims of some form of physical violence by an intimate partner in their lifetime. On average, nearly 20 people per minute are physically abused by an intimate partner in the United States. During 1 year, that equates to more than 10 million men and women being abused.
My name is Alton Dixon. I'm the senior pastor of the Faith Church here in Lancaster, Texas, fccconline.org, for those of you who want to see what we are about. I'm from the great city of New Orleans, Louisiana. I'm a transplant here. Came here because of Hurricane Katrina. But before Hurricane Katrina, I had something very traumatic to happen in my life. At the age of 8, my mother was killed by my father. And just to give you some background on that story and what had transpired all the way up to this point, I never forget, I was 8 years old. I couldn't understand why the most talkative women I know didn't say a word for 20 minutes. And I got all the way home. No one still told me anything. When I got to my aunt's house, at least, there were over 25 people there. I counted myself. And they sat me on the sofa, still hadn't told me anything. And they were talking in another room, and I was basically on the sofa by myself, and the news came on. And it said, breaking news, a woman was shot by her husband at her business. And they flashed my mother's picture, and that's how I found out that my mother was shot. Immediately I just started crying, and then one of my aunties came into where I was, saw the news, and then turned the TV off and then told me what had happened as best she could. From that day on, it changed my life forever. My mother stayed in the hospital for 10 days. She couldn't talk, but she would write notes, and I didn't get a chance to see her before she passed. I didn't get to go to the hospital. They didn't let me go because we all assumed that she was going to make it. That's what the doctors had said, that she was going to make it. She would write notes and say what she wanted my aunties to do for us. And one of the notes she wrote for me was to make sure you take care of my baby and make sure he knows the Lord. And that was just something that was very inspirational for me during that time. Also, one of the things that was very, very important was that, you know, even during that time when she was in the hospital, at 8 years old, I remember her praying so much as a little boy. And when she was in the hospital, I said my first prayer. I just told God that, you know, don't let my mama die. And that was a prayer to God. That's the first time I can remember myself even praying to God and asking him not to let her die. And 10 days later, she passed. And all I can remember was they told me that she was gone to heaven. And I cried for 3 days straight. And it was just the most horrible time in my life. Even at 8, I just could remember how much pain I was in, just knowing I would never see her again. You would think at 8 that a kid couldn't grasp it, but I grasped not being able to see her again. And it was just very, very painful to know that. From that point on, my aunties, my mother's sister, older sister, raised me, my older sister, my older brother, I'm the youngest, and I stayed with one of my aunts for a long period of time, and all of them basically raised me, had a hand in my life in raising me. If it wasn't for my family, who is a God-fearing family and who not only go to church, but actually serve in church, which is a difference. And if it wasn't for them, I don't know where I would be. I certainly thank God for them taking care of me and my siblings and making sure I knew God and I knew who He was and served Him. And so it was great growing up with my family. But as a child and a product of domestic violence, that was I would say, the beginning of what is now I Love Lucy Ministry. I Love Lucy Ministry because my mother's name is Lucy Sertan Dixon. And so that's why we call the ministry I Love Lucy Ministry. And this ministry is for not only domestic violence survivors, but it's for domestic violence victims and domestic violence children, kids, because I was a domestic violent kid. And so we want to minister to those kids who have seen this situation, who are in this situation, who have come out of the situation. I received counseling from the age of 12 to 16 that helped me, professional counseling, not just church counseling, but professional counseling that helped me. And we want to start providing counseling, free counseling for kids who have seen this, from professionals. We want to start helping domestic violence victims to help them to get out of it. We want to help domestic violence survivors to get back on their feet and be able to start over again. We also want to open up the first domestic violence shelter in the city of Lancaster. There hasn't been one in the history of the city, and so we're going to be working in 2019 to try to get that open by October of 2019. Definitely, we want to try to make sure we have something in place to whereas someone can go, male or female, that's experienced domestic violence, and to get away from that. And so I just want you all to please give to I Love Lucy Ministry. You can give at Cash App, $ I Love Lucy Ministry. That's ILOVELUCY MINISTRY. Don't ask me to do it again. I might not be able to. But also you can give to Givelify. You can go on our Faith Chapel Community Church on Givelify and then look for the I Love Lucy tab and give. Another thing I want to say, because I want to make sure that this is brought to the forefront, even though we're honoring my lovely mother, who was an evangelist in her day. I didn't bring this up, but I need you to know this. My dad was a pastor. My mom was a first lady, and this could happen to anybody. Back in the day, supposedly, my dad was one of the greatest preachers in the city. Could preach you under the pew, but he had a mask on. He was living two different lifestyles. He had anger issues and something he had to deal with. He didn't deal with, and that caused him to do what he did to my mother. And so I want to really make sure that we take the mask off and that we really deal with our issues, whatever they may be. In this ministry and what's inside of me is to help people to come out of that and make sure that that don't happen to anyone else. Growing up, a part of my testimony is that I was depressed as a kid. I was depressed from the age of 8, probably to 18. I dealt with that, and it was just a very depressing thing. Went through counseling, still was depressed. And a part of me getting saved was that I told God, that I wasn't going to do anything for him. He told me at 12 that I was going to preach the gospel. And I said, I'm not doing that. You took my mother. I hated God. I was mad at God for taking my mother. I blamed God for taking my mother. And all those years, I told him I wasn't going to do anything for him. God once told me that I was supposed to evangelize and make sure I spoke his word and ministered to his people. But I equated the call to my father. And I thought that if I do the call, I would be like him. And he was the last person I wanted to be like. So I told God I would never do that. I told him he needed to pick another occupation for me because I wasn't doing it. And I never forget this. I was 23 years old. My daughter was born at 22. Raven Dixon, Raven Lucy Dixon, by the way. And she was born when I was 22. And at 23, I had got to wit's end. I was going to commit suicide. I grabbed a gun and I was about to kill myself. And before I did it, I called my favorite auntie. Her name is, we called her T. Claudette. And so she was my favorite aunt. Passed away in August of this year, but she was my favorite aunt. She was the youngest sister, and she was the one I spent the most time with, or I could talk to the most, and the one I called when I needed advice. And she really stepped in as that mother figure. And I called her at the age of 23 with a gun in my head. I told her that I was going to kill myself, and I asked her could she take care of my daughter. And my aunt said these words to me that I'll never forget. She said, son, let me say this. She said, if you want to kill yourself, go ahead and do it. She said, but before you do it, do me one favor. I said, what is it? I'll do anything for you. She said, get on your knees and talk to God first. I said, I don't want to talk to God. I'm mad at God. I don't have nothing to tell him. She said, you said you'd do anything for me. I said, okay, for you, I'll do that. I hung up the phone, got on my knees. And as soon as I bowed my head to talk to God, I heard the voice of the Lord. And God told me, he said, son, he said, don't kill yourself. He said, I have work for you to do. He said, why are you crying and why are you sad? Because your mother did what she's supposed to do. I really thought it was a joke. I really thought I was dreaming. And I asked God, how did she do what she was supposed to do if she died at an early age? How did she do what she's supposed to do if she started a business and it didn't come to fruition and she didn't get the contract she wanted? How did she do what she's supposed to do when she had a master's degree and she wasn't able to live out her life? How did she do what she was supposed to do? And the Lord told me her job was to get you here so you can put your foot on the devil's neck. And ever since then, that's what I've been doing. I made sure my mother dying was not in vain. I've been putting my foot on the devil's neck. And I'm going to make sure, as long as I'm here, that I'm going to make sure that my mother did not die in vain. And so my life is dedicated to not only domestic violence victims and survivors and kids. My life is dedicated to Jesus, to make sure I bring people into the knowledge of him and let them know that me, if he could save me, if he could bring my mind back to reality, if he can do all these things for me and allow me to bounce back even stronger, he can do the same thing for you. On today, I encourage you. On today, I tell you. On today, I implore you. If you don't hear anything else I say, today remember that Jesus is here for you. And he can get you out of any situation. All you have to do is do what I did on that day. Get on your knees, bow your head, talk to him, and watch him come into your life. Thank you. I love you.